Hey, so we're going to build a stage 2 rear leaf spring kit for the Ascender. It fits on the Ascender Blazer and the Ascender Bronco, and I've already got the truck torn apart here, and we're going to do the install on this thing right now. And I'll talk about all my other upgrades that I'm doing, because this is a full-scale interior build, and this is the components that'll get that done. Here we go. Okay, so to get started, this is what you need your truck to look like. I need you guys to start the install by getting rid of everything on the back of the truck. Get rid of your electronics box, get rid of the switch, get rid of the shock towers, take out the center rear brace. If you're going to use a bumper, that is, take it out. I'm taking it out because I'm putting the rear bumper mount in here. You need to get rid of that plastic thing in the center here. Gone. Okay. So you should have this. Of course, this already has the motor forward kit in it. I'm still using the stock drive shafts here on the transfer case. I've already got the GCM front bumper mounted on there. My battery goes on the front plastic brace. I just moved the Vaterra strap to the front, and I strap my battery right in here underneath the hood. Works perfect. Everything fits, no problem. And I've got the servo in the original spot. The Ascender conversion kit just fits right in there, so you don't have to change anything. You have to do the regular motor forward conversion instructions, which are on the web page. I've got the sliders on already, and now I need a rear end, so we're going to build that. If you watched the stage 1 video, you already know this. You need to pull the axle out, get rid of the links and everything, get rid of that top truss. Unless you want to keep the top truss on and keep the top links on, you can do that. If you want to get torque control, oh, I don't need to do that. If you want to get torque control for your torque twist, the twist that comes on the leaf springs because you have power and traction at the same time, if you want to eliminate that leaf spring twist, then you can leave the top links on the axle, okay? And then you have an instantaneous twist, leaf spring twist eliminator, if you will. That will work. You can fiddle with it if you want to do some different spacing or pinion angles or whatever. It's up to you. Again, I showed this in the stage 1, but I'll do the whole thing all over again if you're here for the stage 2 video. Tear down your axle to this point, okay? Where all you have left is a bare housing. Don't need that on there. You need a bare housing. You can just pull off the bearing caps and slide the axle right out. That's all you have to do to get that going. And the first thing we're going to do is take this axle, and we're going to take the leaf mount, which is this little hoopty thing there that you see, and this thing is going to go on the axle tube all the way to the link mount. Okay, we're just going to slide it right on like this. Now, this is a plastic housing. The plastic, because of the way it's molded, because of the way it shrinks when it cures and all that stuff in the mold, the end of this axle is actually bigger around than it is at the link mount. And that's an issue when you're trying to install this. This thing is made to fit. It's going to be tight on the end. The way to install this is just to push it down on the table, and the leaf bracket will actually get stuck right on the end. And then you just wiggle it down. Once it gets on here, past the end, it's nice and free. Okay, no problems. Except it's tight at the end at the bearing cap. Okay, so slide that on. Make sure you have the axle oriented the right way, so up is up and the skid plate is down. I'm going to put the second link mount on, or leaf mount, sorry. Drop that on. And there we go. This piece now can actually just get set aside, and we're going to start building the frame side brackets, which are these big monsters. Okay? So, what you're going to do with these things is take a look at this picture next to me here. In the picture here, you see that at the top is the leaf hanger. This one down here at the bottom with the brass bushing, that's the swing hanger part. And then it shows you where the hardware goes in on both sides. Okay, so have a look at this picture. This is the way that you're going to lay out the parts for each side. The left is just a mirror of the right. So on this one here, you can see there where the leaf brackets go. And I want you to do that install on your main leaf bracket right here for the stage 2. Okay? The only difference between the stage 1 bracket and the stage 2 bracket is the stage 1 bracket has a cutout inside for the vertical shock. Okay, the stage 2 does not, and I'll tell you why later. You don't need that and didn't do it. So, I'm going to install my leaf springs here the same way that you see in that diagram. If you missed the diagram, just back up the video and pause it, and you can figure out where all this hardware goes. And remember that you put the screw through the brass bushing first, then you put the bushing into, I'm going to use the center hole on the back of the bracket, and then you can tighten the screw through the brass bushing. So it still pivots, no problem, on the brass bushing, but the bushing is now tight on the swing hanger. Okay? I'm going to put in my 2 screws for the front hanger. There's a little ditty I want to talk to you guys about. At the end of this video, you will see a little tiny clip at the end of the video about tuning your wheelbase on the leaf springs. There's different holes on these brackets, okay, and that they're there for a reason, because if your leaf is arched a certain way, you have to move the leaf brackets around to keep the wheelbase and make it all work right. Okay? If you change to a red soft leaf from RC 4-wheel drive, you'll need to adjust these brackets, the mounting. If you have a short leaf, you need to adjust the brackets to mounting. Okay? There's adjustments there for this reason, and you can learn about that at the very end of the video. If you happen to need that information, it's right there. Now, I got one side done. I'm going to slap together my other side. Really, really, really easy. And I'm going to put the screw through the brass in the bracket. Then the screw goes into the swing hanger. The swing hanger and the brass get tightened together. And then I'm going to put the 2 screws in the front hanger. I'm using a Tamiya leaf spring from an F350 truck with 1 medium-sized helper, medium-length helper on this particular Bronco. And I have de-arched the leaf spring, if you will. Okay, so my leaf spring is not very bent. It's kind of almost flat, if you know what I'm saying. Okay, the leaf spring is kind of flat. It's not a big hoop like a banana. It's less banana, more flat. And so that means that this truck will work really well in the middle setting on the swing hanger and the middle setting on the leaf hanger at the front. That said, I have both of these built now, and they are ready for action. I will show you what these look like. Here is my set of swing hangers, bolted right through. You can see that. Got the brass bushing in there. My front hangers are mounted in the middle position. And the big bolt that comes with the kit is for securing the leaf spring to the shackle, okay? Right here. That bolt actually threads into the outside of the bracket. Then it threads all the way through the leaf, and it threads all the way into the back of the bracket. That doesn't push through at all. It's threading the whole time. Same with the swing hanger. The actual leaf attachment bolt threads through the bracket the entire time. The next step that we're going to do to the truck is to install the interior shock mount. This is what I call a bridge. You can also get it in the parts section if you want to go from a stage 1 to a stage 2. You really only need this one item, okay? It is a shock mount bridge. This part is going to slide into the frame rail with the screw hole forward right in the back of the rail like this, okay? So that piece of plastic that sits between the rails at the back, it's coming out, and you're going to put this instead of that plastic bracket. Got that? See where that goes? Right there. Okay? Slide out the piece of plastic, chuck it, drop in this new metal piece right there, and just leave it sitting in there. And then the next stage that we're going to do is to actually bolt on each of the side brackets. The new leaf mount subframes are going to bolt on to the sides of the truck frame like this. And if you put it on there and you hold it on there, you'll realize that there's a gap. Okay, you remember in that picture with the assembly hardware, there's the little silver spacers. The little silver spacers are going to go where the shock tower used to be on the truck. So the easiest way to get this done is actually just to stick the piece of hardware through first. We'll stick it in here first, and then we're going to stick a spacer on like that. Then we can drop it onto the spot where the shock tower used to be, and we can screw that in. I'm going to get the next piece of hardware. I'm going to get another spacer, and I'm going to do all this all over again on this front hole where the shock tower used to be. Oopsie-doo. Okay, so once your shock towers are out of the way, you got to fill in that gap somehow. That's all that spacer's for. If your shock tower is still there, for whatever reason you're using it for a body mount or whatever, that's fine. If your shock tower is still there, you can use it. If it's not there, you don't need it anymore, ever again, unless you're using it for a body mount. So I'm just going to screw this on here with the spacers. Okay. And then we're going to duplicate that on the other side. On this right hand side of the truck, I'm going to do the same thing. I'm going to get my long hardware. I'm going to stick it into the leaf mount subframe here. Drop that right in. The two screws, they're on each side of the GCM logo there. And I'm going to put on my aluminum spacer on the screw. One on each side here. That's just like that. Drop that in. There we go. And then I'm going to attach the leaf mount subframe to the right hand side where the shock tower used to be. You just poke that right in there and it'll line up. I'm going to drop in these screws here. Remember that you're screwing these into a piece of plastic, okay? There's that X mount for the ESC and the radio box that's in the middle of this truck. Kind of a plasticky X mount thing with the two little tabs for the ESC. Well, that thing is just a piece of soft plastic. So when you're screwing your long hardware into it, just keep that in mind, okay? So you're not cranking away on the thing. And you'll just strip out the screws. I mean, they're not that strong. So, now what I've got here, you'll take a look at this. I've got the leaf mounts subframes on, okay? I got the leaf subframes on. I've got the leaves already on the subframes, and it's screwed into where the shock towers used to be. You can see the little silver spacers right in here. One there and one there, where the shock tower used to be. And the subframes are in. And the next order of business is going to be to drop in our shocks on the back. Sounds out of order, but Take my word for it. It's a lot easier to get to them now than it will be when we're a little bit farther along. Let me talk to you about the shocks for a second. The way that this kit is set up for this build, I'm using the truck really low to make a stock looking truck. Okay, I've got a 4-inch tire on here. It's a 1.9 DC Fun Country from RC 4-wheel drive. I've got a 5-slot scale 1.9 mag on here. I'm building a scale replica of an original truck. I've got the scale bumpers from GCM. The ride height is not high. It's very scale representation of a original sort of box stock, sort of out of the dealership kind of Bronco. Not off-road stance or anything, it's just stock. That said, the original shocks that were on this truck, the original Ascender shocks, are way too long to build a truck like that. I have SCX-10 shocks in the front, and I'm using stripped down SCX-10 shocks in the back. That's going to be important because when we set this up, the rear shock bridge that we slid into the frame rail at the back, that is now going to carry these shocks, okay? What I'm going to do is install the shock on the inside of the bridge. Right in this space here. I'm going to screw this on right there. Right in the center hole. This SCX-10 shock. Right in the center hole. Right in the middle of the bridge on the forward side. Got that? Now, to do that, you're going to need a spacer. You're going to need the hardware that's in the kit. And all that stuff is there. I think I'm short a couple spacers, so let me go and grab those. Just a minute. So, I need a spacer because the way that the shock is going to be angled like this, I have to make sure that the shock body is not hitting that truss. Okay? Now I'm going to install some hardware here for just a half a second. Give me a second to get this in. And then I'll show you exactly what I did. It's not very complicated. You'll see what I mean right away. I'm going to put the screw through and then put the spacer on. And then I'm going to drop the shock on. And then I'm going to put a nut on the back. It's all the usual stuff, okay? This is pretty easy going. If you want, you can slide that truss, what do you call it, shock bridge, back out. You know, maybe I'll do that just to show you what I'm talking about. And I'll put both of these on so you can see what I mean. Get my pliers going here. There's one. I want to make sure these aren't too tight. So there we go. Like that. And then I'll stick my other shock on the back in the center position with the spacer so the shock's not rubbing on the rear shock bridge. And I'm going to stick a nut on the back. Make sure when you're installing this, if you do it off the truck, you install the shocks at the front of the bridge. Not at the back of the shock bridge, okay? Because you'll have geometry problems with that. Okay, now let me show you this. So, there's the shock bridge. I've got both shocks installed with the spacer, see that? And the front of the shock bridge has the hole towards the front. Okay, there's a blank spot on the side of this bridge at the back, and there's a hole at the front. That's important because when you install this, the shocks have to be ahead of the shock bridge. They have to be in front of the mount. And the hole has to be in the front of the mount, otherwise it won't fit properly with the curve on the frame. That's the whole reason why that's done. Okay, so now that you've got these on, you can do them in the truck or out of the truck, doesn't matter. And you're just going to slide those right in the back like that. Okay, so you should have a setup that looks like this for the stage 2, where the shocks are in the back of the truck, mounted in front of the bridge. Okay? just like this. That's what you should have right now. And now I want to show you this other gap here. We talked about this in the stage 1. It's the same thing. There's a space right there. See it? Between the frame and the leaf mount subframe here, there's a gap. If you're not using a GCM bumper mount, you want to put a spacer in there to take up the gap. But I am using a GCM bumper mount. I'm putting a full scale set of bumpers on this. So that bumper mount is just going to slide right in there at the sides of the frame. And the same screw that goes all the way through the frame and at the back of the subframe, that same long screw is going to go through the bumper mount at this point, or the spacer, and it's going to thread into that shock bridge which we just installed. Okay? That's how that all kind of goes together, and I'll show you this in just a second so you get what I mean. Pretty simple stuff, but I'll show you to make sure that everybody understands what we're talking about. I'll put my other long screw in there, and you thread all that together, and there we go. So I'll put that in and show you. The bridge acts as a nut for these long screws that go through the sides of the subframe. Okay? So now we've got this whole package and it's all just jammed in there and it can't wait to get used. Now that's perfect. Now let me show you that. So we've got the shocks at the back. Okay? They're going to end up going to the leaf mount on the axle. I've got the scale bumper on the back. And this is how it all plays out. We've got the leaf bracket here, the subframe. And this last hole right here is going through my bumper bracket, my bumper mount, all the way through the frame and into the shock bridge here. Same with the top. Okay, so these two holes here, this goes into the frame at the X cross member. This one goes through the frame at the cross member. This one goes through the frame and the bumper mount and screws into the shock bridge. Okay? Now, because I'm using that bumper mount, I have to add two more little nuts on the inside of the bumper mount hardware to finish securing that. I'll just stick those on real quick so that that's cleaned up. Simple job. And this all sort of happens at the same time here because they're all in the same real estate. There's a reason why the shocks go in front of the shock bridge, okay? And I'm going to tell you why right now. When you have your full-scale truck built, for those of you guys who have done this and have interiors in your truck already and everything, and it's just a thing of beauty, and then your shock starts leaking or the cap blows off or you have some kind of a roll down a hill and you have to do some servicing back there, the last thing that you want to do is take your whole interior apart just to get at that one friggin' screw. You know what I mean. It happens sometimes, just the way things are, and you just can't get at the hardware that you need to get at. I didn't want that to happen on this truck, and so you'll notice here that the screws that hold the shocks on are accessible from the back between the frame rails. You can stick a screwdriver right in there and get at those screws from the back without getting into the top at all. And then the nuts that hold the shocks on are accessible from the bottom. So you can put a screwdriver in here, right in between the frame rails, and you can get at the bottom screws without touching the interior. And that's the reason that whole thing is set up the way it is. There's other ways of doing it. We could have threaded the screw holes and then there's no nuts. We could have made it a lot of different ways. But to make the hardware accessible, we had to do it like this. When I'm done with my interior on this truck, I never want to take it off, okay? My floor pans are going to be attached to the frame. My tunnel will come off so I have access to my transfer case. The same way if you guys followed my M1009 military blazer build, it'll be the same kind of setup as that, where you can click off a couple of parts and then service the whole truck without gutting it. So, that's on. I have to, just because I'm using this bumper kit, I left my hardware loose here on the bumper, so I'm going to tighten that up. Down like that, and then we're done. The next step to this project is going to be installing the rear axle into the truck. Okay, we have to do this now and get the leafs mounted onto the leaf mounts that are on the axles. I would recommend you just turn the truck over and get everything kind of lined up. This would be the time to add your drive shaft and all that stuff. If you have that in the truck, you can add that in. I'm not going to do that right now. I have to put the drive shaft on my T-case. I haven't done that yet. I'm not going to do it right now. So, the leaf mounts, these little leaf mounts that you see in your kit, those leaf mounts come with different sizes of hardware, okay? You'll see that there's tons of extra hardware and it doesn't seem to make any sense. Why is all this extra hardware here? And I'm going to tell you why. If you decide you're going to use these helper leaves, maybe 2 of them, maybe 3 of them, I don't know what your setup is, maybe only 1. If that's your setup, you're going to need a different length of screw to attach all this to the leaf mount, okay? That's the reason there's all that extra hardware in there. It's there because I don't really know what your setup is going to be, and I want to make sure you have the hardware that you need to get the whole thing done properly without having to go digging around in some box trying to find the right size of screw, okay? So, it's all there on purpose. I'm using a Tamiya 350 screw leaf. I'm using the 1 middle-sized length Tamiya leaf helper. And to do that, I'm going to use the 6mm long screw, and the whole thing fits perfect. So, if you have more helper springs than 3 total thickness, you're going to need to use the longer 8mm screw that came in your GCM kit. Okay? That's how that's going to lay down. Oh, I forgot the helper there. Gotta put that on. Now, I'm using the helper springs because I like to get rid of my axle wrap using the helper, the 1 medium length helper spring. It seems to work really well for me. And I don't work the truck with a Rock 412 on a 4-cell or anything, so that's not the issues, Brett. But this seems to work really well for me. Now, I am not going to make the leaf springs tight on the bracket yet, and I'll tell you why right now. You see these screws right here? That's what I just installed. The 2 screws right on top of the leaf, and they sit on the leaf mount bracket right here. As you can see, the axle is still flopping all over the place because it's not attached yet. And the way we're going to do that right now is we're going to actually put the hardware through the leaf mount into the axle tab. Okay? We're going to put a screw in here with a nut in the middle, and you'll see that in the axle tab, in the leaf mount and axle tab hardware there. Very simple procedure. You just grab a screw that's the right length from your hardware kit, you slide it in, you put a nut on the inside where the link and the shock used to be, and then you're done. Okay, that's all there is to it. I'm just going to ram these in here so that this thing is nice and solid, and I'll show you the hardware in there. I hope you're having fun building your trucks, because I think this is great. You get to know them, you get to know the reasons for all the geometry and why they're done the way they're done. Hopefully some of this information is helpful for you guys doing all your custom builds, and then maybe you can get some information from these videos that will help you in some other build. I don't know. But I know every time I watch somebody's build videos, I learn a ton. So it's just fantastic. I hope you guys are enjoying that. I've got a couple more turns. There we go. And so it's pretty clear now where I've done this. You just simply put the screw into the leaf mount in the axle, through the link tab and you put a nut on it right there. And that's it. Okay, now that's on. Now I can actually tighten down my leaf spring screws that hold the leaf springs on to the leaf mount. Now I can tighten those because the axle's aligned, the brackets are installed, everything's on and it's ready to go. And for our final step at the back here, I'm going to attach my shocks to the bottom and the back of the leaf mount. Pretty simple. Grab a screw that comes in the leaf mount hardware, which would in this case be a 12mm screw. I'm going to put it through the back of my SCX10 shock. I'm going to screw it into the back of the leaf mount that's on the axle, and there we go. And I'll show you this whole setup. It's so easy. I need to straighten out this helper spring here. It's all crooked. Looks friggin' dumb. There we go. Now, do you see the shock there? The shock is screwed on to the back of the leaf bracket. You see that right there? The shock is screwed onto the back of the leaf bracket. Okay? Pretty straightforward right there. Just screws right on with the leaf on top. And now we've got full travel. The SCX10 shocks are actually really nicely sized for this entire project. Even if you have a higher arch leaf and a little more ride height, the shocks are still really good. The SCX10 shock or the Proline Scalar shock is the right shock for this entire Ascender from front to back. I don't like the stock shocks, they're too tall. Next thing we're going to do is reinstall the rim and bearing setup, which I took off earlier to get my leaf bracket on. Pretty straightforward stuff. You just line up the locker here, and then you drop it in, if I can get it in. And I'm having a problem with that for some reason. I'll try the other side. There we go. Done. And I'll drop this one in here. Put your little holes back in that line up the screws for the bearing cover. I will drop in the bearing cover screws. I don't have to for you to see this, but I might as well because then the truck's complete, eh? Might as well. Okay. I will drop that in there. There's a little tiny screw in the front, little tiny screw in the back, and that holds the bearing covers on. And that'll be great. That one doesn't want to go in because I did not line it up properly. There we go. Leaf springs, of course, gets you extra scale points if you're running in a Sorka class of truck. This is probably strong enough. These two springs are probably strong enough without the torque arm on the top truss to actually continue to run quite a bit of horsepower. You know, I don't think you'll have a problem with horsepower running through these without the torque bar. If you do decide you're going to have a high traction tire and a really high power motor, then I would recommend putting a torque bar on it in some fashion so that you can eliminate the axle wrap. I'm going to try to line up my Vaterra drive shaft here so I can get this thing installed. And I think they're keyed a little funny. They do have, there we go, there's only one way those things go together. to make them happy, and I just happened to find it just there. I will drop that on my transfer case, and the other side. Now the only thing I have not installed on this, by the way, as far as operation goes, is my intermediate shaft between the transfer case and the transmission. That's the only thing I have left to install, and I'm going to show you this whole setup right now that it's running. Take a look at this. Except for the intermediate shaft, which is right down in there, this is a ready to go truck. Battery mount in the front on that front little bar with a Velcro. I'm using a 1300 3-cell, by the way. Motor and trannies up front. ESC's right there. Receiver on top of the servo. I have all of this cleared out for my interior space. I've got a full travel suspension on here with SCX10 shocks. The sliders are installed. Scale bumpers. I can access my shock hardware right between the frame rails here, straight in from the back. Fantastic. So nice and clean. And the body will mount back on the truck just like this. I will be getting rid of my body posts very shortly because I can't stand them. That's essentially the only reason. I don't want to have them sticking out of the hood on my truck. And the back sits like this. I will pull out the sliders so they fit nice. And there we go. Now, this setup that you see right here has the body posts lowered by 3 holes on the body posts. Okay? In case somebody was asking, where's the ride height on it? This particular setup, when I had the body posts on it, I lowered the front 3 holes, I lowered the back body post 3 holes, okay? Just so you know. I'm going to take these out because they're terrible. And we have officially installed a Stage 2 leaf kit on a Vaterra Bronco. The install for the leaf kit is exactly the same on the Ascender Blazer as it is on the Ascender Bronco. There's absolutely no change in the setup or the install. Okay? Just keep that in mind. Depending on what you're building, you have options for bodies now. You can use them on Jeeps and everything else now. The Ascenders are all over the place. And there's our setup. We have a scale, leaf sprung, Class 1 legal right now. It's Class 1 legal Bronco. And I couldn't be happier with this. I love wheeling this truck. It's one of my favorite little rigs to run around on. And now I have all the space in the world in the middle for a full, complete interior, 2-seat, 4-seat interior. By the way, the motor on this setup comes right out to the back of the windshield. So the interior is literally full empty interior. Can't wait to take this back out and wheel it. Thanks for watching. Hey guys, I want to spend a couple minutes just talking about tuning the spring kits from GCM for the Ascender, and show you some close-ups on why you need to know about the spring tuning. Okay, so this particular truck that we're using right here has a Tamiya leaf spring, which is our Tamiya option, and this leaf spring has a really big arch in it. Okay, and because it's arched so much, the ends of the leaf spring actually start to come together as it arches. If you have a flatter spring, the ends will be farther apart. If you have a more arched spring, they're closer together. And so the reason we have all these extra holes here in the bracket right here, and there's extra holes at the back here, you can see them. Those are for tuning your length of leaf spring to the arch and making sure that everything is set up so your wheelbase still works, okay? So you guys might have to fiddle a little bit with the setting for this and the setting for this so that the wheelbase can be nice, and you've got the spring section. If you have a flatter spring like I'll be using on my on-road Bronco, then or you have a really high arch spring like this for sort of a more off-roady setup, you need to adjust these holes to set up to according to your spring arch. Okay, that's what they're there for. If you're going to use a different spring, like say you want to use an RC four-wheel drive red soft leaf spring, then it's a slight bit longer than the Tamiya, so you're going to have to adjust this front eye and adjust this rear pivot eye to match up your wheelbase to the spring length. Okay, that's what they're for, and just keep that in mind when you're building.